Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Gamescript. Tonight is Sunday Night Football. We're going to be looking at the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Green Bay Packers. It's a 42.5-point total with Kansas City as 5.5-point favorites. This is a game where I don't think that we're going to need Patrick Mahomes, though, and there might be an opportunity for us to build some good lineups without him, and I'll get into that after this. What's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching Gamescript. This is a show where we analyze island games like Sunday Night Football tonight, and we give you a DraftKings Showdown perspective on the breakdown of the slate. And tonight's game is Kansas City at Green Bay, a 42.5-point total with Kansas City as 5.5-point favorites. It's an interesting game. We got road dogs, which we like to target, and especially on a showdown slate like this, Jordan Love's been playing up a little bit, and Patrick Mahomes has been playing a little bit down, but it doesn't really matter with the way that the defense has been playing lately. And Mahomes just really doesn't have the weapons to throw to this year, and it's showing in his stats. But the defense has picked things up for the Kansas City side, and they've been carrying the team. And Mahomes' fantasy stats don't really matter to the team as long as they're winning their games. So we'll dig into this matchup. First, I'd like you to hit that like button. I'm trying to get to 15 to 20 likes. We shoot for 15 likes. And you hit that mark, and I'll put out a shorter video closer to lock when I have a little bit more information to work with. And looking for 300 subscribers. We crossed 200 the other day. So I'm going to try to get to 300 subscribers by the end of the season. So if you hit that subscribe button, that'd be great. And you want to hit the subscribe button anyways, because these shorter videos, when I put them up, it's usually closer to lock, and you're going to want to sign up for the alerts to get the alert when the video gets posted. So make sure you do that, and we'll dig into this slate. It's a good one tonight. I like this Green Bay team lately. Last week for Thanksgiving, I underestimated them a little bit, but I ended up starting Jordan Love and a lot of those Packers wide receivers in some lineups, and it ended up paying off, especially those wide receivers. Wide receivers did great on Thanksgiving, Jaden Reed and Christian Watson in particular, and they were super cheap on that slate too. So it really definitely paid off in showdown and in the main slate for the Thanksgiving slate last week. So that was great. Tonight we're looking at, let's see, I got the wrong game up here. Let me just swap that out. Tonight we're looking at the showdown matchup for this particular game. Let me just get to it here. I've built a few lineups already, so I've kind of I'm kind of ahead of where I normally am when I'm doing these shows. I usually try to come in a little bit in a situation where I'm just kind of looking at the slate for the first time, although I've done all my research ahead of time. So this time I've built a few lineups already, so I have a kind of an idea of a direction that I like to go when it comes to actually building the lineups, and we can dig into that here. One of the ways that I've been doing it is kind of leaving Mahomes out of my lineups. Now, I build only a few lineups that I enter, usually into that $15 contest. So this is by no means a call to fade Patrick Mahomes, but I think if you're building just a few lineups and you need to commit to a core and don't have the resources to kind of rotate in all these high-priced guys like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Pacheco and whatnot, then I think it makes sense to leave Mahomes out of some lineups, especially at his price tonight. He's at 18.6, and if you look at what he's done so far this season, he had a 20-point game last week, 21 points. He had an 18-point game before that, for that, like if you look at the outputs of Mahomes this year, he's really only had a few slate breaking games, and he's normally got slate breaking games in every other slate, it seems. But this year he's been really up and down, and it just doesn't justify his price. If you're paying 18.6 at the captain position for Patrick Mahomes and you're paying 12.4 at the flex, that's a monster price for any player, much less a quarterback that's been in a slump. So Patrick Mahomes, it kind of makes him easier to leave out of lineups. That could be a trap by DraftKings to leave Patrick Mahomes out of lineups and set him up to be lower owned. But for now, Patrick Mahomes, leaving him out of a build for this game makes a lot of sense. As far as Travis Kelce, I like Kelce. He's got a good matchup against Green Bay. He's been up and down too this season. 15 points last week, 16 points the week before that. I do think that he has the potential to be the highest raw points scorer on the slate tonight, though. And we see it in like 39 points a few weeks ago, 24 points a few weeks before that, 23 points. He's just had a bunch of these big games, and he's cheaper than Mahomes, which is good. He's about $600 cheaper. I think given the choice between those two guys, I think I would lean Kelce just because of his PPR upside. Mahomes is in a tougher matchup for quarterbacks, and Kelce is in an easier matchup for tight ends against this Green Bay defense. So I kind of lean Kelce if I have to choose between Mahomes and Kelce tonight. Pacheco is another guy that I like tonight. The Green Bay Packers defense is not good versus the running back position. And Jerick McKinnon is out again tonight. So that's a benefit for us if we want to start Isiah Pacheco. He scored 26 DraftKings points last week with Pacheco out of the game. He got a decent amount of targets, 5 targets last week for 34 receiving yards. And then he had his usual workload of 15 rushing attempts for 55 yards. He did score 2 touchdowns last week. So that's why he had like such a big game last week. It is concerning with his output from a rushing standpoint because he really 3.7 yards against Las Vegas, who is not a good run defense last week. It's not a good output. And he's been kind of sluggish in the run game, but in a game like tonight where they're heavy favorites and he is, in a situation with no Jerick McKinnon, I like Pacheco in this matchup tonight. If we're looking at the next guy is Jordan Love. Love has been, just outperforming the last few weeks. He went through a slump there for a while, like with week 4 through about week 9. He was in a kind of just one of those ugly slumps where he's not able to crack that 15-point DraftKings point or 16-point DraftKings point range. But the last 3 weeks, he's put up 19, 24, and 27 DraftKings points. So he's been on a bit of a roll. He's in a tough matchup, though, against Kansas City tonight. But his price is reasonable compared to some of these other high-priced guys. And the defense that Kansas City uses is a defense that Jordan Love has been doing pretty good against. So I would not be surprised if Jordan Love is able to pay off that salary. $9,600 is a decent price for a quarterback on this slate when we know that he's going to probably be needing to throw the ball around tonight with an opponent like Kansas City. Rashee Rice, also with the Packers, their run game is banged up with Aaron Jones being out, and that just sets up the pass game even more, especially knowing that they're going to have to be aggressive tonight. So that just sets up Jordan Love for a good spot tonight. Rashee Rice, he is the only consistent receiver that the Chiefs have. He scored 28 DraftKings points last week. He had a stretch there under 10 points, and then he had a stretch of over 10 points. So he's been up and down, just like everyone else on the Chiefs. But Rashee Rice is by far my favorite receiver on the Chiefs, and he's expensive on top of that. So 8,400. He's gained in price as people have caught on that he's the most reliable receiver on that Chiefs team. A.J. Dillon is not a good running back this season. Like the last couple weeks, he's had double-digit points with Aaron Jones out, but he's barely cracking double-digit points. And it just he seems like he's very running mud type of running back this season. Thing like age catching up to him or something. Like I don't know what his deal is, but he has not been great this year, and he's facing a defense that gives more to the running game than the passing game. Kansas City is giving up 21 DraftKings points a game to running backs versus 8.3 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. They're giving up 19 DraftKings points a game to the slot receivers, which is good, but they're only giving up 5.6 DraftKings points a game to tight end. So Kansas City is tough against wideouts and tight end, but they're also tough against quarterbacks. They're only allowing 14.5 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position too. So that's, a little bit rough for Jordan Love, but fortunately on the other side, Green Bay is only giving up 13.8 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. That's that matchup I don't like for Patrick Mahomes. But they're giving up middling stats to all the other positions. They're giving up middling stats to the running back at 20.5. They're giving up 10.9 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, 19 DraftKings points a game to slot, and 12 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position. So Travis Kelce is set up nicely. We covered him. Mahomes is in a rough spot, and the Pacheco matchup is good. Dillon's matchup is decent, but Dillon has not been playing well, and he's got Patrick Taylor right behind him. Patrick Taylor, I believe, was coming into last week's game a little bit injured. He ended up getting 3 rushing attempts, though, and 1 target, so he didn't really do too much. If we're projecting a game where they're playing from behind, maybe they use Patrick Taylor a little bit more in the passing game. So keep Patrick Taylor in mind for tonight with that matchup against that Chiefs running defense. We move on to Jayden Reed. Jayden Reed has been great this year. He's a rookie, second-round draft pick, and he has 3 games in a row with pretty big scores. 15 last week, 19 the week before that, 19 the week before that as well. He's been doing well this year. He hasn't cracked 20 DraftKings points yet, but I think this is a good matchup for him with those points that the Chiefs are giving up in the slot, those 19 DraftKings points a game given up in the slot. So that sets up Jayden Reed nicely. And he's only 7K. So he's the best weapon of the Packers this season, and he is pretty cheap on top of it. So these Green Bay Packers are pretty cheap tonight, which is a good situation for us because we like playing these underdogs in games like this, especially home dogs. And affordable Packers are a good thing. We can go 4-2 builds if we want to, but we'll take a look at that once we get into the lineup building. Christian Watson is cheap as well. He's only 6,800, but he's only had really 1 good game, and that was last week. He broke out a bit. He's got a much tougher matchup against Kansas City tonight with those lack of points that Kansas City is giving up to the wideout position. So I like Christian Watson, but I don't love him tonight, but I like him in those alternative builds. Romeo Doubs has been getting targeted a ton in the red zone, and he is up and down depending on whether or not he scores a touchdown, it seems. He's had a bunch of 16-plus DraftKings point games, but those are all kind of tied to touchdowns, as you can see from his game logs. He's had like 1 game over 18 points where he didn't need a touchdown to get there. So, Romeo Doubs, he's another one of these guys that is, going to be in a tough matchup tonight versus that Kansas City defense. But Romeo Doubs is another guy in that same price range as these other receivers. Next up, we pass all these scrubs, is Justin Watson, he's the only the only other receiver who's doing anything for Kansas City, but his opportunities are few and far between. Guy barely gets targeted, but when Patrick Mahomes locks in on this guy, like he targets him frequently. I mean, it just kind of depends on what the matchup is, I guess. I don't know if this is a matchup where we see a lot of Justin Watson. The Green Bay Packers have been, as I was talking about, like they've only allowed 11 points a game, DraftKings points a game to those wideouts, and Justin Watson is one of those guys that's going to have one of those more difficult matchups against Green Bay. Looks like MVS has the best matchup against Green Bay from a DVOA perspective. He's running most of his routes from the right side of the field. It's also a revenge game for MVS. So if you take a look at MVS, he is cheap at 3K, and he has not done much of anything. He had one big week where he scored 17 DraftKings points. So we can use that as maybe a visual on what his upside is. Although he's in a tough matchup, like I said, against these Green Bay defenders who are good against the wideouts, but it is a situation where he has the best DVOA matchup, and it's a revenge game for Valdez-Scantling tonight. So keep him in mind and keep him in your player pools. Probably one of the few guys I'll keep in a player pool, and I use those cheaper Kansas City wide receivers just as rotational guys because it's a crapshoot with those Kansas City wideouts, except for Rashee Rice and occasionally Justin Watson. It's just a crapshoot with those guys, and it's a pain in the ass to try to figure them out. So it's good to rotate them in if you have a core that you like. Harrison Butker is, not scoring too many points lately, but he had a stretch there where he was getting over double-digit points for several weeks in a row. I wouldn't be surprised if tonight is a night where he scores double-digit points with a defense that has the potential to kind of stall that Kansas City offense and force them into field goals as opposed to touchdowns, which would also work with having lesser exposure to Patrick Mahomes tonight. The Chiefs defense is another play that I like. Chiefs defense has been doing great this year. They have a bunch of weeks where they've scored double-digit points, and Jordan Love has he's been known to turn the ball over and make mistakes. So the Chiefs defense is in play tonight. Carlson, I think he's also in play. If they're able to move the ball against Kansas City and then get forced into field goals, although I like Butker a lot more than Carlson. Tucker Kraft is the tight end on the Packers. He's kind of subbed in for Musgrave, and he hasn't done bad. He scored 9 DraftKings points last week and 5 the week before that. He's been getting targeted a little bit, only 2 or 3 targets per game the last few weeks, but he's making the most of them from the looks of it. He scored a touchdown last week, and he's not cheap. He's 4,200. So you like to see a guy like that cheaper than that. And Kansas City has not been giving up a lot to the tight end position, so I'd probably pass on Kraft. All my numbers, by the way, of the DraftKings points allowed, I do it from week 5 on. I lop out the first 4 weeks of the season because there's a lot of stuff going on in those first 4 weeks with teams adjusting, rookies getting used to the flow of the game and stuff like that, where it makes sense just to get them off when there's far into the season. You look at what Denver's done from week 5 on, and it gives you a perfect example of why you do that. Packers defense, they're kind of interesting tonight. Like, I think that Mahomes has been turnover prone this season. They scored 15 DraftKings points against Detroit last week. Kind of give you an illustration of what a way that Green Bay can beat one of these higher powered teams. They scored 12 DraftKings points against the Rams a few weeks before that. And then they had another 15-point game against Chicago. But, Green Bay's defense is, worth keeping in the player pool. Valdez-Scantling, we covered. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I'm not really interested in him, but it is interesting with Jerick McKinnon being out. last week he only got 3 rushing attempts. So, maybe not so much Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but if you're looking for salary relief, he's a guy you can dumpster dive for or rotate in. Sky Moore, same situation as the other receivers. A guy that gets few targets and few and far between. Hardman is on IR though, so that increases Sky Moore's matchup a little bit more, or his opportunity tonight. So Sky Moore is a guy that you can rotate in. Just leave him in your player pool and make sure not to start more than 2 of these scrubby receivers on the side of the Kansas City. Patrick Taylor, we covered him. Kadarius Toney looks like he's going to be playing tonight. 1.6K. It's pretty cheap, but you can see why he hasn't hit double-digit points all year. But Toney's a trick play guy, and against a tough defense, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Kadarius Toney get used. And he's only 1.6K, so I don't mind rotating him in. Noah Gray, another guy that sometimes gets the opportunity. He has 1 game over 10 DraftKings points. Just these scrubby guys, man. It's like if you can leave all those scrubby guys out, like that's the way to go. If you can figure out a good build with not having to plug in any of those guys, like that's the way to go. I like Wicks way better than any of those guys. And Wicks had 12 DraftKings points in week 11. He was out last week, but Wicks has, I think he has a lot more upside than any of those scrubby Kansas City receivers. The only one I really would like tonight is MVS, just because of the setup for him. But I don't even, that's going to be a stretch to even play him. I'd rather play Dontavian Wicks, who has more upside, I think, but he's in a tougher matchup. So, maybe it makes sense to do the MVS instead. So other than that, we're looking at a bunch of injured guys: Musgrave, Wilson, Davis, all on IR. Hardman's on IR. Ross is out. Just a bunch of guys are hurt. Toure, it may be the only guy that I'd be interested in under 200. I'm not really even interested in him. It doesn't look like he's getting any targets. So it's going to be tough to find value tonight, because usually when you have these games where you have all these high price studs, you want to have at least one $200 guy that you can use. Blake Bell, we can take a look at him. No targets recently. Hasn't done anything this entire year. So it's tough to find these guys. If you know somebody that I'm missing, just plug it into the comment section and let us know who you like in these dumpster diving ranges, and maybe it'll be someone worth plugging in. But I'm not seeing anyone apart from Dontavian Wicks at 800 that I would play in this dumpster. So let's start building the chalk lineup first. Patrick Mahomes is who the optimizer likes as the captain. I mean, I think just about any slate you see Patrick Mahomes, the optimizer is going to want him in the captain. They have Wicks as a cheap guy to plug in. Let's see who else we got. Patrick Taylor, another cheap guy. Look at all these scrubs you have to plug in when you put Patrick Mahomes in the captain. It just leaves you with like so little options. They like Jordan Love and AJ Dillon. I don't like AJ Dillon tonight. I don't like Jordan. Well, I like Jordan Love. I don't like, I just don't like AJ Dillon. I don't like Mahomes in the captain. It's just like, I feel like it leaves you hamstrung. It leaves you with 11-2 though, and you can use your imagination there on, who you might want to plug in between Rashee Rice and Pacheco or Watson, and Reed. Honestly, that's not a direction I like to go. But if I'm going in the direction of the Kansas City side, I probably would like to lean more towards Pacheco as my captain and Kelce as my other expensive chief. Probably going to want to start 2 of Kelce, Mahomes, Rice, and Pacheco. At least 2 of those guys in each lineup. I'm going to go with Love next, because I think that the Packers are going to have to throw to try to keep up. I like Reed tonight. That leaves us with 31.50 per guy. And keep an eye on Reed's status because he is questionable, and it looks like he's going to be potentially a game time decision, but he's trending towards playing. Looks like this blurb is telling us. And we're going to see what he does in a pregame warm-up tonight. So Jaden Reed is by no means a lock tonight, but just keep him keep in mind what his situation is. Out of those other guys, I liked probably Patrick Taylor the best because I think that is where they are most vulnerable. So if I plug in Patrick Taylor, it's going to leave me with 4,300 in salary left. That gives you options like the Packers D if you wanted to go there. MVS. Let's plug in MVS instead of Taylor and see where that gives us. If we plug him in, that leaves us with options like Sky Moore. I would probably go with Taylor or Wicks if I was in this situation because I don't want to put more than one of these awful Kansas City wide receivers. They just are horrible, and it's a horrible team that we have to keep doing in these showdown slates because it's really a crapshoot when you're playing Kansas City showdowns because you never know which one of these guys is going to get the targets. But that's a build suggestion. If we wanted to, we could swap out Kelce for Pacheco in that captain spot. That leaves us with 2,500. Pretty much the same spot. If you wanted to, even you could swap out Kelce for Rashee Rice, maybe. That leaves you with 7,600. That leaves you with Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, guys like that. If you wanted to, bump out Pacheco and maybe put in Kelce there, that leaves you with 6K. You can play around with that. That leaves you with some options. Maybe you do want to play Mahomes for some reason, like he's 12-4, and it leaves us with 5,400. That leaves you at least with like Watson and Butker and guys like that. So it leaves you in a pretty good spot. Like if you want to use Rice, and then Mahomes is obviously going to be thrown to him, and then you got Valdez-Scantling. Maybe Valdez-Scantling gets lucky and breaks one off. So that makes a lot of sense if you want to start Mahomes in a lineup like that. Let's see. So let's clear this out. I kind of like Jaden Reed in the captain spot tonight, just based on this matchup. So if I go Reed, I like Love because he's cheap. So I'm going to plug him in. I like Kelce, and I like Pacheco. So let's put those guys in. That's going to leave us with 39.5. And this is where I go down a little bit to, like either the Chiefs D or Harrison Butker. If you put Butker in here, that leaves you with 3,100, leaves you with that Valdez-Scantling situation. If you wanted to take Butker out and use the Chiefs D, leaves you with 3,300. Same situation, that Valdez-Scantling range. Plug in the revenge game guy. At that point, you're going 4-2 on the Chiefs side. So if you wanted to go a little bit different from that, maybe we take out Butker and we let's put in maybe Christian Watson. Let's say Watson is able to overcome that matchup. That'd leave us with $1,000. We got like Wicks as an opportunity. I don't want to put that many receivers though in this game. I'd like better if I could get to Patrick Taylor. So if we plug in Taylor, that leaves us with 5,900. I mean, that leaves us in those kicker ranges too, where you can get Butker in there. If you wanted to go a different direction than Reed in the captain, maybe we go with, let's try to find a cheap guy here that would be a good captain. Maybe we go with Christian Watson. Let's see what we can do with Christian Watson in the captain. I mean, he's only $200 cheaper than Reed, though. But if you wanted to go that direction instead, we want to get Jordan Love in there. That leaves us with 6,200 for our last guy. If we have Pacheco in there, Justin Watson, Harrison Butker. So not a really better situation there. Let's use Dubs. We use Dobbs. That leaves us 6,800. That gets us to Christian Watson. So if you wanted to do that, you could get Watson and Dubs in there along with Taylor, and then you're running it back with Pacheco and Kelce. So that's an option. Like there's all sorts of things that you can do to take the Green Bay side of this equation. And they're playing at home. They're home dogs. They're playing against a Kansas City team whose offense has not been as high-powered as we're used to. They have not been scoring a lot of points this year. Look at the points that they've scored. They scored 31. They put up a decent amount versus Vegas, but they put up 21 versus Philly. 17 versus Philly, 21 versus Miami, 9 versus Denver. They had 31 versus the Chargers defense, which sucks. They had 19 versus Denver, 27 versus Minnesota's D, 23 versus the Jets D, 41 versus Chicago, but 17 against Jacksonville and 20 versus Detroit. So there's a good chance that the Chiefs only scored 20 points tonight against a tougher Green Bay defense, which leaves things wide open as far as who the captain could be tonight, and it leaves things wide open as far as the outcome of the game tonight. So keep that in mind when you're building, and don't shy away from those Green Bay heavy builds. We've seen Green Bay kind of adjust like their offense to better fit Jordan Love as the season has gone on, and it's showing up in those last few weeks that he's played with those big weeks that he's been having. But, it could go south for him easily too. But if you're betting and you want to bet in a situation that's going to put you against 20% of the field as opposed to 80% of the field, then don't shy away from those Green Bay builds. We saw it with the underdogs just the other night with, I can't remember who it was, but like the underdog ended up coming through. And if you had started, it was Seattle. If you started DK Metcalf and the captain, then against the Cowboys, then you would have done great. You could, I think, if you faded Dak in that game, it worked out beautifully. We were talking about that in the show, and ended up being a high scoring game. I was projecting a lower scoring game, but the way that we were building lineups, it ended up working out for a high scoring game as well. And the lineups that we were building on the show, I think it was just me on that one. The lineups that I was building on the show did really well, and you would have made some money. And especially if you use those DK Metcalf captain builds that we were doing. So, just keep that in mind tonight when you're doing your Green Bay lineups, and hit that like button, get me to 15 likes, and I'll put out a shorter video later on today, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that shorter video later today. It's going to be heavy on the Kansas City side, looking at from the optimizer, 27% on the 4-2 Kansas City builds, 48% is going to be on 3-3 builds, and you're only getting about 11% Green Bay 4-2 builds. That's what the optimizer projections are. I'd check out, like a site like Established Run or something later on to see what those build projections are going to be. But right now I'm seeing about 11% for 4-2 Green Bay builds, which is the direction that I prefer to go in. Like they seem like a more stable offense as far as consolidation versus Kansas City, who just spreads the ball out too much for me. But, see what you can do with the Green Bay builds tonight, and I will put out a video later. Get me to 15 likes and subscribe to the channel. Thanks, guys.